Hello, and welcome to the ABA program, Building Professional Relationships, Tips for New Lawyers, sponsored by the ABA Young Lawyers Division, the ABA Law Student Division, and ABA Judicial Division, National Conference of Federal Trial Judges, and ABA Solo Small Firm and General Practice Division of the Judiciary Committee. With more than 400,000 members, the American Bar Association is one of the largest voluntary professional membership organizations in the world. The ABA is dedicated to providing members with resources that help them become better legal professionals and to advocating for the rule of law both domestically and abroad. I am Bryan Rogers, and I'll be serving as your moderator today. Joining me on the program is Sidney J. Evering II, Special Counsel and Director of Diversity at Parker, Poe, Adams, and Bernstein, LLP of Columbia, South Carolina. Jen Garner, Associate at Bowditch, Dewey, LLP in Boston, Massachusetts. And Jennifer Irvine, Director of Marketing and Business Development at Bowditch and Dewey, LLP, Boston, Massachusetts. In addition to our panelists, also joining us is Vanessa Ryan, Juris Doctor candidate, December 2017 at Barry University School of Law in Orlando, Florida. Ms. Ryan will be moderating the Q&A portion of the program. During this session, the faculty will be sharing invaluable insights into how new lawyers can build and strengthen, and talk a little bit about business etiquette and advanced techniques for building relationships and strengthening relationships. Before we start the program with introductions by the faculty, as a reminder, the audience has joined this webinar in listen-only mode. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's faculty by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the question and answer session at the end of today's webinar. Now, let's start this program off with introductions. Sidney, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Bryan. As you indicated earlier, my name is Sidney Evering. I'm an attorney with Parker, Poe, Adams, and Bernstein. Parker Poe is a Carolina-based law firm of about 200 attorneys. We have 7 offices throughout the Carolinas and just recently opened a office in Atlanta. And my practice area is public finance. And public finance is a kind of niche practice area, but it basically revolves around helping local governments issue bonds to build capital projects. So a lot of my networking and business development centers around reaching out to city and county managers, mayors, council members, board members, and just leaders in government. I also serve as the Director of Diversity for the firm, where I'm responsible for developing and implementing diversity-related initiatives for the firm.
Thank you, Sidney, and I think your perspectives on networking and interaction with government officials will be very helpful in this panel, as I can imagine there's some unique circumstances and laws that apply to your particular field. Jen, could you go ahead and introduce yourself to this group we have here today?
Absolutely. My name is Jen Garner, and I'm an associate for Bowditch and Dewey. I work in our Boston office. We have 3 offices in Massachusetts, the one in Boston, one in Framingham, and one in Worcester. I concentrate my practice in all aspects of civil litigation. I do a lot of business, real estate, construction, and employment disputes. At our firm, I serve as chair of the Associates Committee, and I also serve on our Diversity Committee. I author and serve as co-editor of one of our firm's blogs called LGBTQ Legal Issues. We provide news and analysis on legal issues that affect the LGBTQ community. Before becoming a lawyer, I taught high school Spanish down in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Thank you, Jen. And last but not least, Jennifer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Jennifer Irvine. I'm at the same firm as Jen Garner, as the Director of Marketing and Business Development. This is my 5th law firm. I've also worked at a consulting firm and a nonprofit, all in marketing roles. And my team at Bowditch and Dewey is responsible for group and individual strategic planning, all the marketing collateral, advertising, seminars and events, public and media relations, the website, social media, internal and external communications, and then I also serve as liaison to most of the professional industry and trade or associations to which Bowditch and Dewey is affiliated.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. And I'll just take a moment to introduce myself a little more thoroughly. As I explained, my name is Bryan Rogers. I'm an associate with the law firm of Swanson, Martin & Bell, located in Chicago, Illinois. My practice is largely based in civil litigation in a variety of matters, including construction litigation, commercial litigation, and medical malpractice. I am a third-year associate, and I've been here with this firm for just a short while. But what I've realized is the Chicago market is a place that's ripe for business opportunities, and so I hope I can provide some valuable information to this panel. As we're moving forward here, I would like to say that networking can be an intimidating and difficult thing. The reason networking is so intimidating and difficult, as we all know, is it's often large and unfamiliar groups of a variety of ages and a variety of professional backgrounds. Furthermore, as this panel is specifically addressing, there can also be a large issue with limited diversity in those large networking panels. Often, these networking groups tend to just be the same looking people who already know each other, which creates a very difficult situation for everybody. Furthermore, it's always difficult to define the actual purpose of the networking session or a group or association that you're going to be interacting with. Are we looking for a job search? Are we looking for business development? It's a variety of different issues that are difficult to address. As many of you are young lawyers or law students, I imagine that the two largest topics are job search and business development. However, each situation presents a unique set of circumstances that can be difficult for everybody to address. One of the most important things in networking is making sure that you stand out. As a matter of fact, we're here in this particular session to determine one of the major questions and basic questions of how to stand out. Sidney, could you maybe provide a couple examples to you about standing out and within your field?
Sure. So for me, it's not so much how you stand out during the actual networking event, but I think where you really stand out is afterwards, and by that I mean networking is really about building relationships. It's not about going to an event and exchanging cards and having small talk. I mean, all of that occurs, but in order to stand out, I think you really have to follow up. You really have to be intentional even before you go to the event. Kind of going there with a plan, knowing who you want to talk to, what you are looking to try to accomplish at the event, and like I said earlier, you really need to follow up. So if you meet someone that you've targeted, so to speak, you've exchanged business cards, you've engaged in the small talk and gotten to know that person a little better. It just doesn't stop there. I mean, you really need to follow up with an email, maybe an invitation to lunch, and things of that nature, because it's all about, building those relationships, because ultimately, if you're looking for a job, if you're looking for a client, people tend to, give business to people that they know well. And so, to me, standing out is really about following up. Because you can stand out for all the wrong reasons. I mean, you can be at an event and have too much to drink and stand out. That's not how you want to stand out. You really want to stand out by making sure you're building relationships.
On the topic of building relationships, Jen, my question to you is, how exactly do you build a relationship in circumstances where you don't even know the person that you're speaking to, as you've most likely met them for the first time?
That's a really good question. For me, my personal philosophy, and this comes into play a lot. I know that a lot of times coming into a room full of people that you don't know can be really intimidating, and it can be even more intimidating if you don't look or feel like the people that you're entering the room with. But my personal philosophy is that people tend to have more in common than they have not in common. And when I walk into a room full of people I don't know, my goal is to find something that we do have in common and capitalize on that. And the entrance can be anything. I've had excellent conversations with people over traffic because we figured out that we lived in the same general region of the state. Networking can be a really intimidating scenario or environment, and I've made a connection with someone because we're in Boston. We eat lobster rolls, and they're always at these events. And I dropped a lobster roll on my shoe, and it was embarrassing. And I made light of the situation and made a connection with the person standing next to me because I used their table to put my things down so that I could clean my shoe off. It could be something as simple as that, but if you can capitalize, if you can identify and capitalize on something that you can talk about with someone that they have in common with you, you're going to be more comfortable and you're going to be able to break into that room more easily.
Interesting. And Jennifer, what I would ask you, to follow up on Jen's point is finding things in common. In your experience as Director of Marketing and Business Development in building relationships with, I'm sure, your law firm's clients, how is it that you actually, or excuse me, what things have you seen in terms of maybe attorneys doing that is counter to relationship building?
Counter to relationship building. I think that you have to think about networking as trying to meet people, and you're trying to get. I think of it a lot of times, and I know some people might not like this analogy, but I think of it as dating quite often, because you're trying to get to that next step. You can't ask people too soon to do something that they're uncomfortable with. But if you ask questions and you listen and you build that rapport, you will get somewhere with somebody. You will find something in common. I think that you have to remember that at these networking events, even the most seasoned networker, the most seasoned lawyer, the most seasoned executive is often grappling for a topic and often grappling for a way to connect with you as well. And so the best thing you can possibly do, even the most introverted person can find a question to ask somebody, anything. Listen more than you speak and build that rapport.
Excellent. So moving forward, I guess we've talked about, building that rapport. And one of the big questions that we have is, in networking, you're attempting, or in any, really not just networking, but even in your follow-up and your performance within your own jobs and as a student, you're talking about being an asset, not a cost. Jen, you talk about how a lot of people ask for business cards and most people give them away, but does that really enhance the relationship or the networking relationship that you've started with that person that you just met?
I think you have to go about it in a very strategic way. One of the things that I remember from law school, being a law student and being a brand new lawyer, was that people said you have to network, you have to go out, you have to meet people. And they say, get 2 people's business cards at every event that you go to. And I really internalized that. And then I started to think about it and challenge that concept a little bit, because it's not about getting somebody's business card. The reality of the situation is that everybody in that room is in there for the same purpose, and that's to meet people. And so they all have business cards. And if you walk up to someone and you say, hey, can I have your business card, they're going to give it to you if you ask for it. So I had to refine that a little bit. So my goal is to develop the conversation that you have with that person in a way that makes that person offer their card to you. Because if you get to that point, if they say, let me give you my business card, they're inviting that contact again. And what it means is two things. It means, one, you made a contact that they're going to find memorable, and two, you were able to direct the conversation in a way that they want to talk to you again.
So interesting. I guess in the circumstances where you have met somebody who has possibly not offered, and you feel that you've created a good connection with this person, and perhaps they have not offered to give you your business card, do you encourage people to still then provide them with your business card in the instance that maybe they'll exchange just, I guess perhaps, as a courtesy? Jen?
It's a delicate sort of process. If there's a reason, because you have to remember the other piece of things is to be very genuine with this process. And so if there's a reason that I want the person to reach out to me again for whatever reason, I will offer my card for the same reason that I'm seeking for them to offer theirs to me, which is that I want to make a connection for whatever reason. If I offer them my card, I want to continue that relationship in the same way that if they offer me theirs, they likely want to continue their relationship with me. But asking for a business card for the sake of having a business card in your hand to take back and put in your contacts list is the wrong reason.
Interesting. And Jennifer, my question to you would be the whole concept of being an asset and not a cost. What does that mean to you?
Well, first of all, I really like Jen's approach, but there are a couple of other ways you could go about it too. So everyone in that room knows that, especially for the younger people in the room, the older people in the room know that all the younger people want something from them. If you can find a way to offer something to them, something that they find valuable, whatever that is, help them interview, do a mock interview with their child who's looking for a job. Whatever it is that you can offer, that will go a long way. So if you're the one that offers something first, then you may be in a better position to make a reconnection and keep that relationship moving forward.
So when you say something to offer, you mentioned some different things. Would these be things that you're building off of maybe you discovered that you have a common interest in or a common business area?
Exactly.
Okay. So if we're talking about getting business cards and being an asset and not a cost to these people, essentially just not being a cheap sell, one of the big things that you have to remember is being memorable, but as Sidney put, not memorable for the wrong reasons. Sidney, in your profession, we talk about being memorable, but you, as you said, you're in public finance and work with a lot of local government people. I imagine, as I said before, there's probably a lot of restrictions in terms of how you can meet those people and what way you can interact with them. Could you expand on being memorable within an ethical boundary, is your profession, or how it could expound upon other, within your practice area, and how it could expand upon other practice areas?
Yeah, sure. So I think I'd just go by just echoing what Jen and Jennifer said. I mean, when you're thinking about being memorable and building a relationship, it needs to be symbiotic. It's not all about what you can get from that person, but oftentimes, more often than not, it's about what you can offer the person that you're trying to get to know better. And people tend to remember people that can help them. And I know, as a younger associate or maybe someone in law school, you might feel like you might not have a lot to offer, but you do if you really think about it. If you really listen to the person that you're trying to connect with, I think, like Jennifer said, if the person has a child or that might be interested in going to law school or what have you, you can maybe tell them about your law school experiences. Or if the person has a child that's interested in going to the same, going to college or anything like that, where you can just help the person, I think it will help you stand out, and you just need to go into it with that mindset that I'm not just here to take, but I'm here to offer help in any way I can, even if it's not necessarily on a professional level.
Interesting, and I think what I'll do is I'll push you a little bit more on that, is how I can be helpful and memorable on a professional level. Would you be able to provide any different insights into professional level as attorney to attorney comparative to being memorable in this circumstance of attorney to client or attorney to prevent prospective business business client?
Sure. So for attorney to attorney, as an example, I mean, oftentimes you can help someone with their specific practice area. So maybe someone has a healthcare practice, and you might happen to know of certain physicians or certain hospitals that might be in need of a good healthcare attorney. Well, you can offer to make that connection, and that can be a tremendous asset. When you are able to help other people make connections, they'll remember that and appreciate that, and you know, that can go a long way in helping you strengthen your relationships with them. Excellent.
And Jennifer, to ask you, again, we go back to the fact that this is usually a large group setting, and I think it can be intimidating just on that basis alone. But how necessarily can you navigate that large group setting to stand out amongst other people?
Well, one of the things I like to do is tell good stories. So if you have a good way to introduce yourself, where it's more of a story rather than I'm just a lawyer that does blah, 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 nobody remembers that. So if you, like Sidney did in the beginning, he told a little bit more about what the practice area means and what kind of work he specifically does for specific clients. You know, that's an elevator pitch. You can refine that to 30 seconds. I once worked with a real estate lawyer who said that he worked with all, his elevator speech was, I work on all real estate green and brown. So that's the kind of thing that, you know, where people immediately ask a question. Oh, what does that mean? Oh, well, brownfields and green development, and you can get into a conversation about it. That's one way to become memorable. There's also some other ways. So I often find that seminars and roundtables and board meetings are a good place to become memorable, although most people don't take the time to think about how to do that. You can say something helpful to the group. You can ask good questions. People always remember the people who ask good questions. You can direct the conversation in a positive way. You can suggest a speaker, because then you're doing two favors, one for the organization and the people in the organization, and the other for the speaker. There are a lot of ways to become memorable.
Excellent. And Jen, again, back to your position as Director of Marketing and Business Development, I imagine making your firm be memorable is a very important part of your job. Would you have anything to add?
Sure. I find that niche industry groups or general niche areas are some of the best ways to become memorable. For example, my law firm has a practice area for craft breweries. And we have a craft brewery blog. It's called At the Bar with Bowditch. Pretty clever title. We're pretty proud of that. And this is the #1 thing that clients and all recruits ask us about. We had no idea it was going to be such a differentiator, but it has been. We also have 4 other blogs that I think are excellent, but it's definitely the area that has gotten us the most press and the most notoriety in the area.
Excellent. Thank you. And so, we've spoken a lot about just being memorable, but there's something more than being memorable. It's being purposeful, and purposeful in the way that you network. And as you'll see, networking generally has 3 steps. It's being prepared, attending, and then following up. And specifically within those steps, preparation in my mind is the most important. Now, you can't always do this if it's the random cocktail reception at some big group event that you just kind of showed up at or walked into. However, most of the networking sessions that we go to, when you really think about it, are planned. If we go to an association meeting, we have the schedule in advance. If you're going to a CLE, you obviously know what the topic is about. Or even if you're a law student, you're going to be signing up for things that your law school offers. Quite often your career development centers will have a list of attendees that they might be able to share with you or at least give you a general idea. But as part of networking is being prepared. That means gather information, research the attendees, the speakers, and the sponsors. Furthermore, you would like to target what you want to get out of the event and think about possible ways to follow up. Specifically, what I'll add with targeting what you want to get out of that event, it goes back to my initial point. Are we here for business development? Are we here for getting a job? What are the other people here for as well? Obviously, in law school, our biggest concern is getting a job. However, the likelihood that you're going to be able to get a job out of a single networking is very slim if you're just, as we've talked about before, just going around and giving out business cards. So in this sense, in my opinion, you really have to understand what you want. Yes, I want a job, but is there a specific area I want to practice law? Is there a specific area of law I'd like to practice? Or is there a specific region I'd like to practice? Because the fact of the matter is, if you can know what you want, you can then direct your questions to the people you meet to see if they can fill those needs. More important, after preparing, a big issue always is actually attending. As I said, I'm an attorney here in Chicago. However, I am quite involved in the ABA. What I've learned over the years is a lot of times people don't actually attend. You sign up for things and then you don't go. So number one, if you're going to sign up for something, prepare for it, and then number two, attend it. And the other thing is, don't be a lurker, and if important, determine the definitive next step. Don't be a lurker is, don't just kind of hang around. Actually push yourself into the situations. If there's a group speaking, I know it's difficult to do, but sometimes kind of walk up and introduce yourself. We always are a little hesitant to put ourselves out there, even as lawyers, but the fact is, our named partner just told us, if I was batting 500 for every business opportunity or every business pitch I made, I'd be the best in the world. But the fact is, he knows that even he, as our named partner, has not actually landed every other business pitch he's ever made. The fact is, a lot of times when we put ourselves out there, we end up getting rejected. But we still need to take those attempts. Make those attempts, excuse me. And then lastly, follow up. A big issue is you meet somebody, but then you don't actually follow up with them. I think we've used the dating analogy before. Again, you should send them, and follow-up can be a variety of different things. If you had a great conversation about a specific area of environmental law, and that person practices in, say, Michigan, and you practice in South Carolina, they might not read the same type of articles that you do that are coming out of South Carolina. So a great way, besides just sending an email after the event, which I do recommend that you do, and actually I recommend that you send an actual personal note, because those are much more influential than just an email. But instead of just sending the note or the email, send an article from your region that they might not be aware of about the topic that you two were discussing. If nothing else, the person might read it, and it prompts an additional conversation before you. One of the biggest problems I've always had is you just send the additional follow-up email, and the response back is, it was nice meeting you as well. Well, the fact is your conversation is now ended. However, if you give a reason to continue the conversation, it's more likely that you'll develop a long-term relationship with this person. Other examples, as we said, could be write a blog post relevant to your discussion and send it to them, or send them a comment on something they wrote. So another thing that I've realized through networking over the years is a lot of people who are really good networkers do a lot of other things. So you do a quick Google search of them when you get home and you realize they've written a lot of blogs. Those people stand out, and they stand out because they put themselves out there. So look into them a little bit, and then you can really realize that they do a lot more, and you can start engaging with them about what they do. Jennifer, do you have any thoughts on sales techniques and what to do after a networking session?
Sure. And I agree with you. The follow-up is always the place where people fall down. And I'd just like to make the point that if you're not doing all three of these things, then you're not going to be successful at networking. Attending is just 1/3 of the process, and follow-up is where everyone follows down. But there is a sales technique called the definitive next step. This is something that a lot of other industries use, a lot of salespeople use. Some of you may be victim to this yourselves. But if the context is important to you, don't do this for everybody, but if this context is important to you, never leave the current interaction without determining a specific next step. And it could be something simple like, I will email you tomorrow to set up lunch for next month. Or in the case of sending these articles, you could say, especially if it's an article that you wrote or a blog post that you wrote, you could send it to them and say, I'd love to hear your feedback on this article. I will call you next week. And then call. Don't forget to call. And then during that conversation, say, hey, we should get together for lunch. How is next month? Okay, and then don't leave that lunch meeting without a definitive next step as well. Only if this person is important to you.
So that definitive next step is literally creating the next opportunity at that very moment. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And Jen, I think that you've already shared some interesting stories about how you've met people and how you've created relationships. Do you have anything specific in terms of attending and then what you've done in the follow-up after attending a networking session?
Absolutely. My biggest thing is that you can think outside the box when it comes to that definitive next step and follow-up. It doesn't have to be lunch. It doesn't have to be something that comes to mind immediately. One of my strongest networking connections came from offering to buy Girl Scout cookies from her daughter. So we left the event. I got her business card. I said, oh, well, let me know when your daughter's selling Girl Scout cookies. I'd love to buy some. I followed up with her and I said, you signed me up for these boxes. That set up several follow-ups and next steps, because then we had to see each other to exchange the cookies. When we saw each other from exchanging cookies, we made plans to attend a breakfast, and it went from there to there to there. And she's proven to be a very valuable connection since then. Another example is when you're in one of those larger speaking events. If you hold on to something if something that the speaker says to you, you find particularly striking, you can make a conversation about that issue. But if you have something else to offer, that's helpful as well. For example, if they spoke on a topic that you'd recently read an article on or you recently read a book about, send them an email and say, this book made me think of your topic. Send them a copy of the book, and then they'll reach out and you can start a dialogue that way. But whatever it is that you commit to doing, you have to actually complete. Otherwise, it gives you're memorable in the wrong way.
Thank you. So we've discussed a lot about different antidotes and techniques that we've used, next steps, interesting ways to create a further lasting connection with these people. But a big question that we all have is, what groups are we actually wanting to be a part of, and how do we choose which groups to be a part of? And I think that's a big question that all of us have is, especially as diverse lawyers, is there some specific place that I can make a home for myself and feel welcome within that group? Jen, do you have any particular thoughts on that issue?
Yes. Generally speaking, when you're looking at professional groups or what groups to join, think about the strategic purpose of your groups. Are you looking to join a group because you'd like to get industry education? Are you looking to join a group because you're hoping to develop some business? Are you looking to join a group because you simply like what they do? Figure out what it is that you're trying to get from that group and approach it from that lens. Affinity groups can be good because small communities tend to really take ownership of their programs and what they're doing, and I found that the people that participate in affinity groups are very, very welcoming and willing to interact because you're a member of the group. There's a sense of ownership there. But when you're looking at these affinity groups, don't overcommit because you can only do so much. And if you're going to participate, you should do it with both feet in.
This is Jennifer. I strongly believe that people don't really have the energy to give to more than 2 groups in a meaningful way. Maybe 3, maybe. But that's sometimes a stretch for a lot of people. For example, I've been actively involved in the Legal Marketing Association in New England for a long time, serving as president 2 years ago. But I started to wean off of that a little bit, and now I'm becoming more involved in the Boston Chamber Women's Advisory Board. And through all of it, I have been a member of the Museum of Fine Arts Museum Council Steering Committee because that's of interest to me. The others are really more of a professional, manner. I don't think that I would have the energy to give to all 3 of these meaningfully, so I have to pick 2 at a time.
And I'll just add in there one really quick point is, I think you all may notice is, both panelists, Jen and Jennifer, reference professional, as the slide says, professional groups and interest groups. And that's something I've noticed as well. As an active member of the American Bar Association, I enjoy conversing with individuals within the profession. However, it doesn't necessarily expose you to opportunities outside of the profession. And something like a board for a fine arts group organization or museum or your local YMCA exposes you to a whole group of individuals who still have similar interests, but are not necessarily doing the same thing. And I think that becomes more important is once you're trying to develop business. Although lawyers can pass business around, and some are more generous than others, a lot of your business opportunities will present themselves in becoming part of groups and organizations that are not necessarily lawyer-driven. If you're the only lawyer there, you're going to be the one that people turn to. And so I think it's really important that you attempt to look into organizations outside of just professional associations. Moving along, it's another important topic, and especially in today's changing society, is how do we embrace diversity within networking, and what does diversity mean to networking? Jen, do you have any personal thoughts or any thoughts about how diversity is important to you within the profession and how it plays a part in networking?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of times diversity kind of, it can compartmentalize things. But again, my personal philosophy is that common ground humanizes people. Overcome those differences by capitalizing on the things that you have in common and then introducing differences. People are interested. They want to know about you. The people that attend these events are there because they want to meet people. And diversity can give you, it gives you more to talk about. It gives you more to discuss. It gives you more vibrancy to the conversation.
An excellent point. Are there any circumstances that you've dealt with that you felt that you could utilize diversity in promoting yourself, or just any circumstances where diversity has come into the network? It has been part of the discussion that you've had with people when networking.
Absolutely. Both internal and external networking. I'm very, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a co-editor and author of our LGBTQ legal issues blog. And what that means is that I follow LGBTQ issues very closely, and I'm sure a lot of people have at least heard somewhat in the news throughout the South. There are issues surrounding the trans community that I've followed very closely and I've been very interested in. And people that I have met, both within our organization and externally, have been very interested to know my opinion and have sought me out to have conversations about that, to see maybe what their organization should do to be more inclusive, perhaps whether or not they should attend a conference, and what they should present on when they get there to be useful and be sensitive and be informed. And those conversations have been very useful to me because it's allowed me to sort of deepen the relationship with those people, and it's been useful to them because they've learned things that they maybe weren't exposed to before our conversation.
And I think you just you used a hot topic word there of internal networking. Internal networking, I think, is something that us lawyers often forget about because we sit in our offices all day. It's one of the big issues I've noticed, and especially in your larger law firms. And I think this is also an issue that affects law schools, and we lose a lot of opportunities there. In the sense of law school, internal networking is the concept of getting to know the people around you and making sure that the either your law firm or your own school, you're standing out there. I can think back to law school of many people who basically just did their work and then went home, came back the next day, and then left. And I've realized now that I'm working in the profession, there's a lot of connections that even though I didn't do that, I missed in law school. For example, the firm I work for has a client who deals in a variety of retail stores, owns a variety of retail stores, and I now just noticed that one of the associate general counsels is somebody who I went to law school. And like I said, I was somebody who did put myself out there, and I did meet a lot of people, but I think back to this now, I did not have a really large law school class, and that's somebody that I really didn't take the opportunity to get to know and meet. And this is somebody who now I'm going to be working with, and although we have a cordial relationship, it's something that I could have already had a better foundation. And in that regard, it's just shocking how getting yourself out there, within your own law school or within your firm is really important. Sidney, have you ever, how exactly is internal networking or just important within your own firm generally?
Yeah, it is extremely important, and I think the example you gave of law school it's right on point, because when you think about it, the folks that you go to law school with are going to be your colleagues. I mean, they're going to be the people that you have cases with. They're going to be the people that refer business to you, or like you indicated, they might become in-house counsel, people that you get business from, some of whom are going to become judges and things of that nature. So it's very important to not just kind of hunker down into a silo and forget to get out. And just as it's important in law school, it's important in a firm, because people have to get to know you. There's so much business referrals that go on internally, and especially if you're in a larger firm, if people don't know you, then that referral might go to the next person. People need to know what you're capable of, what your interests are, and so if there are events, after-hour events, although you might not feel like it, maybe you've been in the office for 10 hours and you just want to go home and relax, it's worth taking that extra hour or hour and a half out of your day and getting to know your colleagues, because it's going to be very important as you matriculate through your career, that folks really get to know the true you and your capabilities.
Excellent. We've talked about capabilities, and we've talked a lot about a lot of broad principles. But I think one of the big issues in general, and I'm sure many of you heard this before, but it can't be restated enough, is learning and practicing business etiquette, and just the little things that go along with business etiquette. For example, as I said before, when in doubt, introduce others. That's something I think has become really important for me, is you don't always know everybody around you, and just taking the time to introduce somebody else has actually prompted that person to say their name. And I said that a little in a bit of a backwards way, but what I mean is there's often circumstances where you may have met somebody before and you can't remember their name. And if you're in a group, what I've used as a little tactic is introducing the person next to me. Hello, I'd like you to meet Jane Smith. And then Jane Smith introduces herself, and the person whose name you could not remember actually says, oh, hello, my name is David Jones. And it's just a little trick I've used over the years in those circumstances where you just don't remember everybody. You might have only met them once before. As always, a good, strong handshake is still the professional standard. Look somebody in the eyes. Make sure that it doesn't linger, but it's a firm handshake. Always be courteous. Don't interrupt people. However, we all know the circumstances where that one person in a networking group is always kind of leading the group in not necessarily providing other opportunities for people to say something. One way around that is tail off of something they've said. I'm not saying necessarily cut them off, but if they're talking about, a business plan that they reviewed and one of their goals is to market themselves in security services, you might talk about tail into that of some experiences you've had with security services. It's a way to be respectful and find common ground without necessarily feeling like you're just cutting somebody off. Always try to watch your language and not use slang. Show a general interest, genuine interest. Keep eye contact, as I said before, and then treat everyone in the group the same way. You'll often realize when you're in a group of judges, everybody just tries to direct their attention to the judge. Well, be that person that stands out in really treating everybody in that group as an equal and engaging everybody in the same way. It shows that you're a responsible person, you're a fair person, and it creates a little difference between you and everybody else. Jennifer, is there anything that you've ever seen about talking about good business etiquette and business practices?
Sure. These are pretty basic business etiquette, but there are so many more things that you need to know. At the very least, knowing more will make you more comfortable, and at the best, it will help you make a good impression. There are a lot of online resources, but on the next slide, I'm giving you 2 resources that you can look at on your own. Manners Smith Consulting is a person that I've actually hired before to do a program for a firm. Her website has a ton of information on it. Things like, when to hold the door. What do you do when there's a rotating door? Who goes first? Things like that. It'll just make you more comfortable in the situation. And I'll just give you one tip that once you hear it, you're never going to forget it. And it's hold your glass in your left hand at networking events. That leaves your right hand free to greet people, and no one wants to shake a cold, wet, clammy hand. So hold your glass in your left hand.
And I think I'll piggyback on that. Put your name tag on your right chest area so when you go to shake hands, your name tag is the first thing that people see. But
that's another good one.
Tip. Thanks. Great tip. Thanks. We've talked about a lot of broad general principles, and now that Jennifer has actually provided you a place to get some great business etiquette tips, I think there are some other advanced techniques that everybody can employ to really make themselves better at networking. And again, we've discussed networking in a really broad sense, and that's what makes it such a difficult topic. If there's any advice that we can give, it's really understanding your goals. And from understanding your goals, you can then develop other techniques in terms of accomplishing those goals. Such things as, if you're trying to just promote yourself within your own firm, it's talking to your partners. If you're a young associate, it is honestly talking to your partners and asking them for things like if you can help with their business plan. I know in my firm, we are all required to write a business plan, whether it is the 40-year senior partner or if it is the second-year brand new associate. Everybody is required to write a business plan, and we actually do discuss those business plans. And what I'll say is looking at other people's business plans and then learning what they do has really helped me, 1, write my own, and 2, given me an opportunity to know what all the different partners do within my firm, as it's a bit larger. And if you're interested in pursuing a different area, you have something that you can specifically ask them whether they need help with, instead of just kind of the general pitch of, oh, I'm interested in employment law. Well, if you know what their business plan is, and if you talk to them about their business plan, you can ask a very targeted question of, no, I would really like to help you target this client because they have a lot of FMLA issues, for example. The other thing is visiting clients. I know this isn't something that you're going to do necessarily if you're in law school or as a brand new attorney, but you'd be surprised at how often if you just ask a partner, can I go along with you to meet this client? I've emailed with them because I've been sending them reports. I would really like to introduce myself. It's something that shows initiative that you want to go above and beyond just doing the office work, the work that you do in the office. Another one is offer to work on a pro bono matter with a partner you don't know well or a client. Partner with your client, prospect to host an event. Partner with the client or prospect to present a seminar, panel discussion, co-author an article. It's something that might not be is normal in the circumstances that you will be authoring a article with a client, but what I can say is possibly a trade organization that your client is a part of. For example, one of our clients is part of a large contractors network that releases a quarterly newsletter. Well, speaking to your client and offering, I know that you're a part of that trade organization. They have different articles on different topics. I'd love to write an article about basic insurance practices that they should be aware of. I'd love to put in your trade association. Do you think that would help you and your colleagues? And that could be kind of a more specific way to present an article with a client. And then starting a monthly lunch club for referrals. And I think that's another tip for internal networking. Find a reason to meet with your fellow colleagues within your office and talk about where business is there. Jennifer, on the topic of visiting clients, how difficult is it at times to get attorneys out there to be visiting clients, or is it something that you need to remind them?
Shockingly, I love attorneys, but attorneys do need to be reminded of this one quite often. It's very easy to put your head down, and you speak to your clients on the phone constantly, but there's nothing like visiting a client's place of work. I know several attorneys who once a year will just go work in their client's office all day, go put in 8 hours at that office, and it does a lot for them. They can see how the office is run. They can be part of it for the day. It's a really interesting way to go about it. I also have a lot of skeptical partners who I speak to about this one. I had one in particular several years ago, a partner at a previous firm who had a client of 10 years in Georgia. He's in Massachusetts, the client's in Georgia, great relationship with the client as far as he knew. He had never visited them. I suggested this. He was still skeptical. I made him do it. He booked a trip, and he could not believe that they threw him a barbecue. They were so happy he had joined, and he had taken the time to go visit them. The Southern hospitality has no end, and he was delighted that he did it, that he took the time to do it. It's worth it.
Excellent. And for the law students, what I'll say is, you might not have clients yet, or I'm assuming that you don't have clients yet. I don't think you should have clients yet. Obviously, I think that's another unauthorized practice of law. But I'll say visit with your professors and visit with alumni. And I know that can be a little difficult, and I don't want to use the word mentoring because that carries with it a lot of weight, that term. But visit with your alumni. If they do practice in the area, ask them if you can stop by their office. If you get to know them and you know that they have children or something who work in the area, visit with them, talk with them about their kids or how their work is doing, or stop into their office. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend doing it unannounced all the time as they're busy, but then again, sometimes it doesn't hurt just to say hello. So it might not be clients, but there's still plenty of different individuals that you should be reaching out to at different times. So, I think at this portion, we really, we've already been going for quite some time, but we'd really like to get to your questions. And so what I would like to do is we've already received a number of questions ahead of this program, and we appreciate you doing that. However, we also have been receiving them throughout this program. So what I'll do is I'll hand this off to Vanessa, who can ask the faculty and myself different questions that have been, as I've said, been submitted during the live program, or questions that were submitted during registration. Vanessa, would you like to go ahead and kick us off here?
Sure. The first question that we have is from Jesse Vassallo, and he is asking if you've tried to contact a person multiple times after a networking event and have not received a reply, when is a good time to give up on that contact, or should you keep pursuing that contact?
Sidney, do you have anything you could jump in to add, or anybody?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm sure law students come across that all the time. I think the first thing to remember is that a lot of attorneys are extremely busy. They get perhaps hundreds of emails a day, dozens of phone calls a day, and unfortunately, a law student is not going to be at the top of their list. But it's important to, I would reach out maybe 2 or 3 times. If you don't hear back from them, sometimes you just might have to move on, and I know that's difficult, but I guess my rule of thumb would be about 3 times, maybe 2. You don't want to get to the point where you feel like you're stalking the person. But I would say 2 or 3 times. I don't know if the other panelists have any thoughts on it, but that's kind of my rule of thumb.
Jen, I think that do you have any thoughts?
I do. I would say take into consideration who it is that you're contacting. If it's a perfect stranger and it was just somebody that you thought you could be that you could build a relationship with, that's one thing. But remember, in business development context, or in a business development context, nobody's going to bite on the first couple of contact or the first couple of opportunities to contact them. And so sometimes you have to persist a little bit, but be careful when towing that line. For example, it takes an average of 7 times for somebody to offer you business, and the fact that they don't respond doesn't necessarily mean that they don't appreciate the thought. I'll often send an email and say, I came across this article and I was thinking of you, hope you're doing well, and I almost never get responses to that. It's not because they don't like me, it's because they're busy, and that tactic actually resulted in one of my first clients.
Excellent. Vanessa, do we have another question?
Yes, this one comes from Mary Watson. She asks, how can a student or young lawyer ask for help without coming across as an opportunist? She kind of goes into some detail about building a relationship with a mentor or professional and just being apprehensive about asking for help. So just some thoughts there.
Well, what I would say is, first off, understand and know exactly what type of help you're asking for. So, I mean, is it help to get a job? Is it help with figuring out how to get into a specific practice area? They're all related, but it's important to know exactly what you're asking help for. And I think the fact is, is a law student or even a brand new lawyer, more senior lawyers, I think, accept, or at least the experience that I've had, they accept and understand that you are going to be asking for help. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's understanding and being very focused on what type of help you need that can actually end up impressing them. Instead of just saying, oh, I need help generally, if you can say, I'm focusing on this issue, or I need help with this particular problem, it shows that you have the initiative to put yourself out there, and it shows that you're interested in that specific topic. So for me, it's, opportunistic, I think I don't want to necessarily use that word, just because it's a common understanding that, as a law student or even a young lawyer, that you're going to need help, or even a senior lawyer. I mean, I watch partners ask each other for help all the time, and it's something that is just very much a defined issue. So I think it's building the relationship first. I wouldn't just go up to somebody and ask for help, but it's building a relationship, it's investing some time into them, in finding out what they like and what they can do. And then if that person is the appropriate person to ask help from, then I would go ahead and do it, just knowing what your expectations are. Does anyone have anything to add? Or I think we should maybe go ahead and go to the next question, Vanessa.
Okay.
That was perfect.
Great, thank you. And the next question again comes from Jesse Vasallo, asking, should one attend a networking event that you do not have a particular interest in just to expand on your network?
This is Jen Garner here, and I would advise against that for one reason, and that's that going just to go doesn't. You should be strategic in what you're doing and why, and that becomes more important as you continue along your career. But the reality is that a young attorney has a lot of demands on their time. You have billable hours to worry about. A lot of firms have pro bono requirements. There oftentimes are continuing legal education requirements, and then you have to fit networking and business development in on top of all of that. And so I wouldn't advise attending just for the sheer fact of attending, unless there's without any further reason. It should be something of interest to you, or it should fit within one of those compartments. Is it industry development or industry education? Is it business development? Is it an industry group that focuses a lot on an area of law you're really interested in? Is it an affinity group where you've made commitments that you need to honor? I wouldn't attend something that has nothing to do with what you'd like to do, or with what you'd like to do or what you're interested in, because it also comes across as not genuine.
And I agree with Jen that 99% of the time that's true. However, if there's an organization that's important to the firm, and it's important that you wave the flag, or it's important to a partner at the firm that the table is filled, and those kinds of things are expected of young associates, and the partner involved will be very, very grateful, and they notice this kind of thing. So that would be the only reason that I could think that you could go, would do that.
Yes, I agree with that. I totally agree.
A great additional point. And I know that we're scheduled to finish at 1:30, and what I'll do is I'll make a little closing remark here, but we'll go ahead and take 2 or 3 more questions, just for all those people who would like to stay on the line. Again, I'd like to thank our faculty for this program in sharing your expertise with us. On behalf of the ABA, I'm Bryan Rogers, and thank you all for joining us again today for this webinar. We'd like to invite you to learn more about the American Bar Association at www.americanbar.org. And before you will actually exit out, we would like for you to utilize the evaluation to come up on your screen and go ahead and fill it out for us. But like I said, we'll go ahead and answer 2 more questions at this point. Vanessa?
Great, okay. Let's see here. Looks like our next question comes from Marie Elizabeth, and she is asking, it sounds like there's a consensus on going to events, but as a law student or a young lawyer, how much time should one designate to networking?
I'll take this one. Sorry, this is Jennifer. I mean, I'm always going to tell you to do more. I would say a good rule of thumb is to attend 1 or 2 things a week, and you can define that however you'd like to define that. That would include internal and external. And I would say, especially for a younger lawyer, 5 hours a week on this would be a good thing to do. Some people may do less, but I don't think you're going to get as much out of it if you do.
And this is Bryan again. I would agree with Jennifer's comments. As a young lawyer, I know well that you don't have a lot of free time. Especially I'm within as I said, my first 3 years of practice. And so I would just add on to that. I would focus a lot on the internal events too. Obviously, you need to grow your network outside of your law firm, but initially, you really want to make sure you do have a strong network within your law firm. So I would look for at least 1 event a week if there is something going on within your firm, even if it's just going to lunch with a group, or if there is something more structured. But as a brand new lawyer, I would definitely recommend emphasizing on being internal. Vanessa, I think we'll take 1 more question.
Okay, great. And the last question comes from Jamie Fanner. She asks, what if you're an outlier professional? For example, if I am disabled or Jewish with, looks like a zitzies on the four corners of my garments, or I wear a turban on my head, how do I get past the bias or initial perceptions persons may have of me at a networking event and still make those connections, especially when I may only have a few moments per person to network?
So I'll offer an initial comment here, and if anybody has anything else to add, please jump in. As we discussed earlier, we had a slide as well, is embracing diversity. And a big part of that is also self-confidence. And I know that can be really difficult if you feel that you are, if you stand out in a different way from everybody else. But the self-confidence of the matter is, I think that speaks worlds of, like I said, your self-confidence amongst that group, and it will reflect well with attorneys who are taking the time to notice those types of things, and I think a lot of them do. So, being confident in presenting yourself and putting yourself out there really speaks volumes of the type of person you are, and I think would then translate into your initiative to meet new people, and in terms of law firms, your initiative to go out and get clients when that becomes an important part of your practice. So, although it can be frightening at times, I think the fact is you putting yourself out there and being confident in the person that you are is going to be most important in that circumstance. Anyone have anything else to add?
Yeah, this is Sidney, and I'm sorry, I totally agree with that. Being confident, and don't, just assume that just because you're different, there's going to be some bias against you. Oftentimes, being different can work as a positive. I mean, we talked about standing out earlier. You can stand out just because you're different. I've been in a situation as a black male. Well, I've been in a room with people who don't look like me, and I've stood out in that sense. But I never looked at it as a negative, and I've never let that crush my confidence or make me feel like I didn't belong. So I would say embrace it and remain confident when you're out there doing networking.
Thank you, Sidney. As I said, that we took a few more questions, and I know we've run over by about 8 minutes now. Again, on behalf of the American Bar Association, I'd like to thank you all for joining. And then, again, thank you to our faculty for taking the time out of their busy days. Sidney, Jen, and Jennifer, we really appreciate your comments. And to all of you, we wish you the best in your future endeavors.